What did we learn at Pacers exit interviews about the team, about things that happened this season that will matter for next year, and about the individuals? I took notes on every player. I wrote it all down, and we'll get to it all today, position by position and player by player, on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and Circle City Spin. And today, we're going to wrap up looking backward by looking at exit interviews. And tomorrow, Tyler Schmidt's going to join, and we're going to do Pacers Awards. And we're going to really get going on this offseason because all the information from last season has to be digested in order to figure out what it means for next year. And today we're going to do that via exit interviews. Every player spoke late last week or in the weekend about the season, about how it could help them for next year, about individual things that I think do or don't in some cases matter. And we're going to break it all down in terms of what I think were the most important things said, how it impacts the whole team, or in particular, a lot of this is going to be something I never thought about that a player said that I thought was very illuminating and very telling about the vibe of the team, or the psyche that they'll have to kind of figure out in the summer. And that kind of drives me to where I want to go first, which is I'm going to do this by position, and we'll start with the guards. Is talking to TJ McConnell at his ex interview, and I asked him the question specifically about this, but early in his career, he was on the process Sixers, and they were way worse than the Pacers were this year. Like half as good. They went 10-72 one year. Right, he's been on teams with 25, almost 30 game losing streaks, and I wanted to pry to him as a now 10-year veteran. TJ, how did those kind of years help you with dealing with hard seasons, and in what ways are you better for it? Do you think this team can get similar benefit from it, or is it an individual level thing? Because obviously the Sixers have not had the team success of the Pacers even since then. So he knows better than anybody how important those reps were and are, even for his career. And his perspective on it was fascinating to me in that exactly that. He still looks back at that time as being important for him. And it's now 2026. Like his rookie year in Miles Turner's was the same 2015-16 season. It's possible that the dividends of this season that just happened, and when they're playing down the stretch, guys, 8 through 17 or 18 on the roster, that it isn't really known how felt that impact is for a while, right? If it's unknown until 2030 that Kobe Brown getting these minutes, or Micah Potter or Jalen Slauson or whatever, playing all this time that they may not normally have played on a better team or on a healthier team or whatever, I think McConnell's perspective and him just in general, his career arc, could show the value of what happened at the end of the year, despite the Pacers obviously losing a bunch of games. The other thing I wanted to pry at, and I thought was illuminating for TJ himself, is this was outside of the year he messed up his wrist and only played 27 or 28 games, the fewest games he's played in a season of his career. He's 34. There was a lot of muscle injuries. Does he feel like he needs to change anything for his, bodily care? And I think that had the Pacers, let's say, been headed for the playoffs, he might have played more games, probably certainly would have played more games. Regardless, he knows that he needs to be better every year, endlessly, basically, at age 34, going on 35 next year, about taking care of his body every year and getting ahead of things, right? This year, it was hard for him to keep up with that. He literally had a hamstring injury in the first quarter of the first preseason game. So a big part of him being as good as possible, because he would come online and then get hurt, and then it would take him a while, and he'd come online and get hurt, is being ready to go right away. His offseason conditioning is maybe the most important of any player because his role is significant for this team. Haliburton, we already did his exit interview. It got its own episode/segment last week if you want to check that one out. Andrew Nembhard, I thought was really interesting. I'm going to write a story on this one, but something that I wanted to pry into with him was he played point guard all year, and that's great. And any improvement is improvement, even if it's not a position you naturally play. But when Tyrese Haliburton's back, he will not be playing point guard. And I wanted to ask him about, hey, like what do you specifically think when you're playing the two again and you're not starting at the one and you have the ball less often, you'll be better at the two? How will this help you next year? One thing he mentioned is different situations and just his general confidence when those reps come his way. And then I understand, like, he had better defenders on him this season. He had more challenging situations to navigate. He was in charge of distributing a lot more than he'll have to. So he'll make better decisions, or he'll have seen more things when, even no matter what position he's playing, he has to do any sort of thing next year. But the other thing he mentioned that is, again, obvious if you really think about it, but hasn't been a huge subject of discussion for Andrew Nembhard's next coming season is Tyrese Haliburton gets a lot of attention. Like, how many times in the playoffs or in Haliburton's worst games was one big part of the discussion? Oh, they face guarded him. And that's always been a big way to slow down, not stop, but slow down the Pacers for at least a little bit, is face guard Haliburton, make it a 4-on-4 game. If Nembhard is a better floor general and distributor and organizer because of this season and can make those 4-on-4 moments more threatening for the Pacers, it's harder to face guard Haliburton, right? That is a change in his game and development that came from this season that could matter for one of the best strategies against the Pacers across the last 2 years of their success. Crashing the glass for other teams and face guarding Haliburton have been two of the better ways to keep them out of their pace game. If one of those two things goes away, that's great. And so that's a big part of this that I thought was fascinating. Also, Pride with Drew a little bit about how much harder defense was with the big offensive load. You can't exert the same amount of force and energy on both ends when you have to do all those things. We knew that, but that's critical for next year too, is if they ask him to do more offensively because Haliburton's not the same level, and that's an if. Haliburton expects to be the same level. Tatum looks amazing in the postseason. But if that is the case, it will be harder to see peak defense Andrew Nembhard if he's asked to do more on offense, even though he still was quite a good defender at times this season. And something he was happy with that I never contextualized perfectly was his 3-point shot this season and it being an improved percentage. And he talked about that before the season on a podcast he did up in Canada. So he finishes the season at 36.1%. Like, on paper, you think that's about average. And it's a career best for him by 0.4%. It's not like he did some insane raising of his percentage. But what he did do is, one, he took way more. He took over 5 a game. He had never taken more than 3.5 per game before. And because Haliburton wasn't playing, the ones he took were way harder. So it is perhaps true that next year, if he is the 2 guard starting again, well, he will be that. When he's the 2 guard starting again, that he's taking, let's say, 4.5 a game, and they're much easier. And so he'll have better volume. And let's say if they're easier, 39% accuracy, that is a much more potent player. Like, he is much closer to the shooter he needs to be than he was before the season started. He had the most illuminating basketball topics of any of the guards. To me, like Cam Jones talked a lot about, it was tough with him because you always wonder what these rookies think of their season and what they expected and all that. And his expectations fell apart so fast. After Summer League, he's hurt with the back thing and hasn't played for 28 games, and then he gets arrested for speeding, right? He really had to rely on his teammates to get through his early part of the season, and then he's in and out of the rotation. And it was tough for him to kind of have any sort of season where the focus was just about basketball. But his next steps, I thought, were telling. I think he nailed the answer of what do you want to work on in the summer when I asked him. He said doing things with both hands. Could not agree more. That's a big thing for him. Going left, he's got it. Going right, doesn't happen. Never happens. He's got to be able to go both directions, especially with how much of his finishes kind of require finesse going around guys. If he can only go one direction, and if he's playing often, at some point, it'll be easier to kind of know what's coming from him. Something he noted that helped with his assist numbers is how much he connected and learned specific elements of his teammates. That is, of course, something that came with reps, and that's good, but you wonder if the team changes, what it's going to look like, or if his role changes, what that's going to look like. So I would like to see if that both-handedness can help him be more dynamic and just have general pet plays that he can get to good passes out of, because he is at least a good enough vision guy with his passing when he actually gets space and takes space, but that doesn't happen all the time. Quentin Jackson called the season the most eventful he's ever had and thought the vibe stayed strong. I wanted to ask him about that because I mentioned it on this podcast before. Kyle Taylor and I talked about the team spirit a little bit last week. Something interesting about the Pacers to me, in a good way, is they have a lot of good vibes guys, a lot of good behind-the-scenes guys who keep the spirit up and keep the team very close. And I consider Quentin Jackson one of them. There was a fun conversations to be had that were had in Summer League last year that he played in about, they call him the LA guy, the California vibe, and how that everybody is kind of attracted to that. And so I wanted to know what he thought of the vibe, and he thought they stayed strong this year. That'll come up with another player as well. And he's a big part of it, staying up. And to be clear, I talked about this with Kyle, like being around the team. I'm able to. I agree. Like, I don't think, obviously it falters a little bit when you lose over 60 games, But I don't think it fractured or weakened in relationship. I think guys just were heavy of losing and were otherwise very close still. And Quentin Jackson was a big part of that. As for Ben Shepherd, the last guy in this segment, and then we'll do bigs next. He got asked to do a lot, and a lot of times it didn't look pretty. Playing point guard early in the year is the biggest, most obvious one. He should not be playing point guard in the NBA. He did have to handle the ball a lot more often. Later in the season, it looked a lot better. I mean, there were 2 or 3 games late in the year where it was a major focus that Ben Shepherd had like real bursts in transition in Charlotte, and holy cow, he's driving to the basket. How many times in that game? I can't remember what the game even was. It was right before Charlotte where he had so many 2-point successes. It was like half of a segment of this. Oh, yeah, it was in Chicago. That was an incredible game from him. But it took till the end of the year for that to come online. Regardless, he said doing all those things helped him find skills he didn't even know he had, right? He seems like a candidate for a guy that 6-7 years from now, if he's still playing and playing well in a rotation, goes, yeah, the end of that 2025-26 season really helped me grow and stay going forward. I really appreciated his quote about kind of what I just talked about with Quentin Jackson, the vibe. He said, quote, when things aren't going our way, there's just a different feeling, right? It is different when you're losing versus winning, even if guys are close. I appreciated the honesty from him. Let's get to the bigs. Zubac spoke. Jay Huff on his season and what's next for him. Micah Potter on the blessings of making the team. And one subtle part of this offseason that I think, in theory, could be a boost. It's all coming up here on Locked On Pacers. First, everybody, let me talk to you about 5-Hour Energy. If you've got a sweet tooth like me, you know how tough it is to find that perfect treat without the sugar. That is why Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy shots bring that nostalgic flavor back in a whole new way. Those 5-Hour Energy Fruity Rainbow shots treat your taste buds to an explosion of fruity flavor with a tasty caffeine kick. It's a quick, easy way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple on the go. So many of those flavors are appealing to many people, but it's a zero sugar treat, that's sweet tooth approved. I was reading too fast. It's very convenient, small portable shot you can grab whenever you need a little pick-me-up. I could use one right now. It's become the go-to when people want something sweet without going overboard. Get candy-flavored chaos with Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy shots. Available online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. And we are back here on Locked On Pacers. Next, make this your first listen today and every single day. Locked On Hawks. For your second listen, Brad Rowland on a now even series in the West, or it's so close to over. I was hoping I could get through this game before recording this, but I'm way too tired. Nuggets down 1 with 1:18 to go as I pull up the score on my phone. Locked On Wolves or Nuggets, if that series could be even. And check out the Everyday Club, a new offering here at Locked On. Ad-free episodes of Locked On Pacers, members-only Discord access. You can join at LockedOnPodcast.com/everydayer. Let's talk about the bigs, but before, I want to talk about something that I found kind of unique as framing for what's coming for the Pacers offseason. They have been very quick ascent good team. That's not the most common thing. It's not impossible. What that means is, especially as the guys they've gotten from their teams came from largely good teams, they have a ton of guys. This isn't even an exhaustive list who are going into like their first or second offseason ever where it's the full time. And, Aaron Nesmith, for example, and this will come up in the forward section. This is his second offseason ever in the NBA where he's not in the playoffs at all. This is the longest offseason he'll have, basically. Jarris Walker and Ben Shepherd, 2023 draftees. First time ever they haven't made the conference finals in their career. What does that summer look like for them? Johnny Furphy, his first playoff miss. Cam Jones, his first playoff miss. Andrew Nembhard, his second playoff miss. You get it. It's the case for a lot of these guys that this summer is the longest or close to the longest. It's just different. What does that mean for their recovery, for their health, for their skill development, for their chemistry with teammates? I'll be fascinated by how all of that happens and what it means for all these guys who have all been successful. The team has been successful, but is in a new situation where they have a new summer to approach. That is not the case for the first two guys here who have been on some non-playoff teams, Jay Huff and Micah Potter, who did their exit interview together, which was fun because they've been buddies for a long time, dating back to the pre-draft process. But Jay Huff, one of the two guys who joked about not speaking with me for various reasons. His was because I kept asking him about playing all 82 games, and he was worried about the jinx, but he made it to it. That was really big for him. I think in a season full of everybody else getting hurt, that was a big pride moment for him, as it should be. He was bouncing around on 2 days for years, and all of a sudden he's playing all 82 games for a team that hopes to contend. Honestly, for him, I think the biggest part of his exit interview is not a new thing and not a new revelation, but something I'll be curious to see in action is how much going through a year in the system helps him. Because playing center for the Pacers is unique. I ask guys about it every time they come to the team. What do you think about playing center and what you're going to have to do? And they'll say, oh, I've done some of this stuff before. I can do this or that. And they do it and they can't do it. Like, it takes time to learn it. That was a thing with Zubac. Talking to him. We'll get to him in a second. Right? Jay Huff came in and had conditioning stuff to get over. Rick Carlisle said it straight up on the record. Like, that's very rare. And then he had to learn the system, and it took him a bit. Right? That is a thing that happens to centers. Miles Turner got quite good at the stuff he had to do. He's not on the team anymore. Other guys have to learn it. So I wonder how much that will be a thing that helps him next year, because they haven't had to have new centers ever, right? They had the same guy for 10 years. So it's going to be fascinating to see how this works. Even their backups were largely similar with Sticks and Isaiah Jackson and such until basically this season. So I'll be fascinated to see if Jay Huff's their backup 5 next year, what his opening night, fit, performance, etc. looks like. Micah Potter, honestly, I think the biggest thing that I took away from him talking is part of what he felt like made him stick and helped him. And he played well, to be clear. He earned the spot. I said he should keep the spot after his first few games, is that he came in at a time when things were terrible, right? He came in the middle of the 16-game losing streak and played pretty well. And that vibe boost at the time was kind of needed. He attributes that specific thing as being an important part of him sticking around. And I do think his personality, at least his positivity, was a mesh for the group, and he obviously made a bajillion shots down the stretch you can never turn away, a shooting 5. So he was very just happy to make it as far as he did. I played his free agency answer on this podcast last week, but I never even considered that part of it, that a shakeup at that moment when you're, Gabe McLaughlin's been on the team, and now James Wiseman's on the team, and now Micah Potter's on the team, and you keep losing. It's like, oh, this guy's playing pretty well. That's good. That's very helpful. 18 seconds left. The Nuggets are down by 1. Looking forward to seeing the end of this as the podcast is exporting. And Ivica Zubac's obviously a big one. A lot of the questions for him that I found the most interesting, or things concerning him that I found the most interesting, were actually from other players and what they felt like they got out of playing with him and the skills they felt they benefited the most from and things like that. And I felt like the guards were the most illuminating in that they all brought up screening, right? And how good he is at screening and what it meant for them and how much it opens the floor. And we knew that. I talked about that a million times. Guests have talked about that. People who cover the Clippers have talked about that. But you do wonder, for a team that's going to have a lot of interchanging guards and trying to get downhill all the time, once they really understand how his screens help and the angles and when they can get him the ball and things like that, if that's going to be a bigger boost than I realized. Like, everybody's very quick to bring that up along with his feel. So I'm very interested to see how that goes. We don't have a ton of details on his injury and didn't really get him because he got hurt and didn't talk after, but it happened during their game against Portland. He said in the first quarter. He's not exactly sure when, but he is a good guess, which to me means he actually probably does know, but doesn't want to blast out the specific play. But it was hurting during that game, and he didn't realize it was fractured until the next day when he was really hurting. Rick Carlisle talked about how much he was hurting as well. So it was good for him to play still. To him, to Zubac, he said that he felt like he got the most out of his time playing on the defensive end. That's where he learned what they want to do and the tempo and the terminology and the things like that. There's adjustment on both ends, the coverages, things of that nature. That will help him a lot going into the summer, I think. This is similar to a player we'll get to in the forward section, but having any experience at all, so you don't go into the summer just guessing what you need to work on or what's different that's going to, require work. That's good to know. And I think that mattered a lot for him. And now that he knows what is required of playing center for the Pacers, like I mentioned with Huff, he said in his answer and talking about next year, he wants to get in, quote, the best shape of his life. He'll be 30 next season. So that's important. He did note that he did not even practice with Siakam. Their injury timings just did not even make it possible. But in general, I felt like the most interesting things about him came from his teammates, right? What did they think of him? What do they believe he'll look like next season and things of that nature? I highly recommend watching his and the things that he learned. Let's do the forward. Siakam, fascinating, and he dunked on me. Everybody loves when Pascal Siakam dunks on Tony East. We'll get to all that to close out today's Locked On Pacers. But first, everybody, let me talk to you about FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here. They're a blast. Every possession matters. Every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series right now. FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. Many people love it because right now you can hop in, bet $5, get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters when you're looking at the stars, the role players, and the key adjustments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. So head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's on FanDuel. Play your game. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day, your second listen. It's official. It's over. Locked On Wolves. Ben Beacon will have more on a 1-1 series. Everybody was clamoring after the first Saturday of the playoffs. Oh, this first round's going to stink. All the home teams are going to waltz through it. And now we have a Wolves win. We have a Hawks win. We have an Orlando Magic win. Somehow, I think this is actually going to be a somewhat interesting. There are 2 or 3 series that will suck, but this is actually a very fascinating first round to me. I'm completely playoff pilled already. I miss talking about covering the playoffs so much, but I am diving into fever, and that has made me very tired because they're doing practices super early. So if you can hear it in my voice or see it if you're watching, I'm very sorry. Let's finish X interviews up with the forwards. And by the way, the rest of this week, for those of you interested, before we get into this, Tyler Smith tomorrow talking Pacers awards, and the draft ties are broken. The Pacers were not involved in any because they didn't tie with anybody. But there is, at least especially the lottery to me, some interesting wrinkles and hurdles that come from it to talk about with the results for trade possibilities. Thursday, first scouting report, AJ DeBonsa with Ben Pfeiffer. And then Friday, the first season review of Rick Carlisle and the front office with Caitlin Cooper. Will be very fun. Okay, let's talk some forwards. I wrote about Jarris Walker today. I'm going to write about all these guys for different reasons. And to me, Jarris Walker's season was obviously 3 seasons. I've mentioned this many times. And it was almost exactly broken into 1/3 of the games. The first 28, the next 26, and the final 27, where the first 28, he can't do anything. He can't make anything. He's turning it over. His stats are meh. Then the next 26 or 27, whatever I said, he is making everything, but not really adding to his game with any rebounding or assists. And then in the final third of the season, his efficiency dips, but not a lot. Like he's still shooting 39% from 3, but he does everything else fantastically. And so for him, I found the most fascinating part of his ex interview. 1, how did that happen? Like what led to such drastic growth in season? And 2, what is it possible for that to be more consistent next year? Because he talked about a turning point for his year being when they went to Houston and he got to talk to Kelvin Sampson down there, his college coach. But in general, as it came to his growth this year, he said, quote, early on, it was tough just just adjusting to having so much more on my plate. So that was different. And then once I got my footing, trying to figure out the best way to continue to grow, to continue to get better, keep impacting basketball games. And I think that is how he got to grow so much this season. Is in a normal year when the Pacers were trying to win or they weren't super injured, the start of Jarris Walker's season, he would not have played. But he would have had his minutes pulled. They didn't do that. They stuck with him because they had to, and he got better. And then by the end of the year, he was legitimately quite good. And that matters a lot for future seasons, that he got that time on the floor. And as Rick Carlisle called it, unconditional minutes. And he even noted that in one of his ex-interview answers. He said it was so beautiful about the season. So I thought his was illuminating if you want to watch it, just in terms of how this season helped him grow with time on the floor. And everybody's going to roll their eyes and go, of course, they never play their young guys. These guys should be on the floor. To some extent, that's true. But it's like this specific year that is super the case when they're trying to win. That is less the case. You're trying to win first and happening to get those guys on the floor second. Kobe Brown. He thought the move helped him so much, and I've talked about some of this, but the word he said was involved, and when that was about how the trade helped him. And I've said this before, but with the Clippers, they had stars. They said, Kobe Brown, go stand over there, catch and shoot. He, with the Pacers, had the ball and was asked to cut and pass and dribble sometimes. That's not something he ever had to do, and that involvement really helped him. He said about his summer, because of that involvement, he wants to sharpen all the tools. But you could really see with him, he had the first couple of games he played with the team where he was scoring quite well, that he had this early to mid-March stretch where he was just he's fine. His efficiency's kind of He's not doing a ton. And he kind of talked about that stretch being part of his adjustment to a new team. He was very hesitant. He was trying to avoid mistakes. He was learning a new system, right? He had a couple games in a row where the shots weren't falling. After that happens, you're more cognizant of the rest of the things that you're doing, and you don't want to mess them up. But once he kind of got through that hurdle and just really went for it, and everything kind of changed. I don't know what the perfect game to sum this up is, but he had this stretch where he was not making more than 1 or 2 shots in a game for months. In fact, he didn't make more than 2 shots in a game from February 24th to March 17th, right? So almost 4 weeks of play where he was shooting 43% and averaging very little. And then after that, he really picked it up again. And actually from that point on, for the rest of the season. From March 17th to the rest of the season, he shot 55% from the field, 46% from deep, and averaged 11 points a game. Averaged 11 points a game. This guy had 2 double-digit scoring games in his career before the trade. So I thought that was a very good summation, and I like the way he described it with, you're trying to prove yourself. You're trying to get another contract. You're trying not to mess up. But at some point, you get comfortable and you can actually do stuff, and that's when he started to do stuff and prove who he really is. Johnny Furphy, he is hurt. We haven't talked to him since until his exit interview. He's off crutches. I said the wrong thing. I posted that he's out of a boot because I wasn't thinking about injuries. He's off crutches, not out of a boot. Moving much more. I asked him about if he has a timeline. He said no. I didn't expect him to answer with any specific thing, but I was curious if he had a hopeful return date for next season. For him, the tough part of this has been the mental recovery because he had if you'll recall, the ankle injury earlier in the season. And he, at the time when he recovered from that, said that was the longest basketball injury he's ever had. And it stunk. And then he's playing very well, very well. He called it found his feet with more playing time. And he hopes to not take a backward step from that. And that's great. But it's so mentally taxing to recover from that and be playing well and then have that ripped away as well. So how he mentally battles back from that will be very telling. Aaron Nesmith thought he learned a lot this year, despite, he got hurt early. He had some struggles at times with some of the stuff. But it was hard. It was hard for everybody. He did say he was one of the guys who admitted at least a little bit that sometimes this season got easier, but was made easier, by the fact that it would creep into your head, okay, at least next year, it'll all be better, right? Things will be healthier. It'll be easier to push into that. But he's looking forward to a healthy summer to get better, right? I mentioned this with him earlier, that this is only the second time he's missed the playoffs. The first time was, I can't remember if it was his first season with the Pacers or one of his seasons with Boston, but a long summer where he hopes to work on a lot of things, a lot of roles and responsibilities. He was really happy with his decision-making growth this season, which I found to be an interesting answer. 2 more guys in their exit interviews. One is Obi Toppin, who he, like Quentin Jackson, I talked about the vibes. He thought the vibes really held up and the team stayed very close. Again, Kyle Taylor and I talked about this last week. To him, playing through the end of the season was really helpful for the summer. And so 2 things about that. One is I appreciated the way he described it he didn't want to go into the summer not knowing what it was going to feel like to play again. But you can only play 8 games and have that happen, or 10 games or whatever. He wanted to really get his athleticism back. He had the between the legs dunk that didn't count against Detroit, for example, just to be like, okay, when next season starts, if I'm Obi Toppin, I'm feeling like, yeah, I'm Obi Toppin still. Like, I'm still Obi Toppin. I got this. And to me, I don't know if this is actually a thing or if this is just human element me. I was thinking about this last week. If you're a young guy who's playing in some of these games where, you like, let's face it, you're thrilled to be playing a lot, but the team is not, super caring if they win or lose. Who are you to coast or think that if Obi Toppin is playing? Like, if you're a young guy and you're like, well, Obi's playing, I got to do this. I got to play. And he's, playing hard and having fun. I wonder if that helped or how much that helped the rest of those guys in that situation. That is purely me thinking out loud and not something Obi or anybody said. But that is another potential factor of him playing down the stretch. And at times, some other guys, although they got everybody out of there who needed to be. Last one's Pascal Siakam. Just listen to it. I brought up this a lot with his answers this year. You just have to hear him say it. One, that's the point. His tone and his voice should be the reasoning voice, but he really did a really good job articulating. I keep tripping over my words here. He did a really good job articulating kind of the mental challenges of the season, and he doesn't want to cope with all the losing, and he doesn't want this to be a thing where they think, yeah, we'll bounce back next year. Like, he's hoping his teammates do not sink into that. And I highly encourage you to listen to that. He also dunked all over me. So if you don't like me or you want another reason to listen to Pascal Siakam talk, perfect. You can listen to Pascal Siakam dunk on me for asking him a question about his least favorite phrase of number one option. I forgot. He has said that before, and I forgot. He did know what I meant, though, and he answered it, which was important because he did talk about how teamwork will be a big part of the sort of shifts in roles coming next year when Haliburton is playing again. And that's obviously true, but it really reinforces all the stuff Rick Carlisle says about the team being an ecosystem and how 1 or 2 guys being out is so important. And it's key, right? The other thing he mentioned about his bigger role with Haliburton out is his confidence that he and the team will get in late game situations next year, even when Haliburton's back on the floor. But the other quote that went kind of viral that I liked that Pascal Siakam says, they have to bring rage into this after all the losing, because he doesn't believe they'll just flip the switch. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he says in Orlando to his teammates about the coming season. And that is Pacers exit interviews and what it means for next season and how people felt about this crummy year. You can watch them all on YouTube. Thank you all so much for listening today. 3 guests in a row to close out the week. Really looking forward to it. You can find me on social media at Tony R. East and this podcast at Locked On Pacers. Back tomorrow talking more Pacers. Till then, everybody have a wonderful day.